Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jai Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jai Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jai Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Shri Radha Madhav ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text 4. Asrakshid Bhagavan Vishwam Asrakshid Bhagavan Vishwam Gunamayatma Mayaya Gunamayatma Mayaya Taya Sangsthapayatyetad Taya Sangsthapayatyetad Bhuya Pratyapidhasyati Bhuya Pratyapidhasyati Asrakshi Bhagavan Vishwam Asrakshi Bhagavan Vishwam Gunamayatma Mayaya Gunamayatma Mayaya Taya Sangsthapayatyetad Taya Sangsthaphaya etad Bhuya Pratyapidhasyati Bhuya Pratyapidhasyati. Asrakshit, caused to create. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Vishwam, the universe. Gunamaya, endowed with three modes of material nature. Atma, self. Mayaya, by the potency. Taya, by her. Sanstapayati, maintains. Etat, all these. Bhuya, then again. Pratyapidhasyati, conversely dissolves also. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. By His self-shattered potency of the three modes of material nature, the Lord has caused the creation. By His self-sheltered potency of the three modes of material nature, the Lord has caused the creation of this universe. By her maintenance, the creation, and by her he maintains the creation and conversely dissolves it again and again. Once again, by his self-sheltered potency of the three modes of material nature, the Lord has caused the creation of this universe. By her he maintains the creation and conversely dissolves it again and again. This cosmic universe is created by the Lord for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with Him by imitation. The three modes of material nature are for the further bewilderment of the conditioned souls. The conditioned living entity, bewildered by the illusory energy, considers himself a part of the material creation due to forgetfulness of his spiritual identity. And thus he becomes entangled in material activities, life after life. This material world is not for the purpose of the Lord Himself, but is for the conditioned souls who wanted to be controllers due to misuse of their God-gifted minute independence. Thus the conditioned souls are subjected to repeated birth and death. Om Jnanam Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadammayam Dadati Svapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. By self-sheltered potency of the three modes of material nature, the Lord has caused the creation of this universe. By her he maintains the creation and conversely dissolves it again and again. So this is a very nice verse. This is part of the list of questions that Vidura is asking Maitreya in this chapter. So we saw that in the previous verse, Vidura asked Maitreya that why does the Lord create? If the Lord is self-satisfied, why does he create all these worlds? And in this one, he's starting to ask, which becomes more clear in the next verse, he's starting to ask that if the soul is pure, why does the soul fall into the material modes of nature? If the Lord is present within the heart of the soul, so he's the soul within the soul. If the Lord is present within the heart of every living entity, and if the soul is part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa, every soul is part of him, then how is it that this soul becomes conditioned by the three modes of material nature and falls again into this material world? So these questions are very, very difficult questions. These are like the really, you could say, hard philosophy questions. And after Vidura asks these questions about why the Lord creates, Why does the soul fall into this material world, which is basically the question of the fall of the jiva, which is also a question that we know is very difficult to answer. Bhagavatam describes in like text 7 that Maitreya becomes very disturbed. He becomes agitated when he hears these questions, but then he immediately starts to answer them. So in this verse, Vidura is describing the situation before he asks the question in the next question. So he's describing that the Lord has created this world out of his potency, which is composed of the three modes of material nature. And then Prabhupada in the purport is explaining why he has created the three modes of material nature and this world, for whom he has created it. So first point here is that Maya is known as Gunamayi, meaning that Maya is literally defined as a potency composed of the three modes. So we are living in the world of the modes. We're living in the world in which everything is composed of the three modes of material nature. And this is why everything that happens in this world is all a combination of the modes. And we live in this world of duality, in this world of happiness and distress, honor and dishonor, pleasure and pain. And we measure things in terms of this duality. Therefore, our lives are always are not absolute, but are very relative. Our lives are very, conditioned. And spiritual life means, coming to spiritual life means realizing, and until we realized it, reminding ourselves that we are not the three modes of material nature. So the body is composed of the three modes of material nature, and we are considering ourselves to be the body. Therefore, we think that we are the modes of material nature, but reminding ourselves that we are not the modes of material nature, that is this body, but rather we are its spirit soul. The happiness and distress, the pleasure and pain, the honor and dishonor, the struggles of this world actually have nothing to do with us. They're actually not important. They're actually simply distractions on our path of spiritual life. And we are concerned about all these things, but we should be concerned about what is our spiritual identity? What is our spiritual form? What is our spiritual relationship with Krishna? We have to concern ourselves with that forgotten relationship with Krishna and reviving that relationship. So here in the purport, Prabhupada makes it very clear and makes some very amazing points here about why we fall into this world. Why does Krishna create this world? He says, this cosmic universe is created by the Lord for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with him by imitation. So again, Prabhupada is giving us hints as to why we have come to this world. So he's saying this world is not created for the Lord for himself. He says this later on also. The material world is not for the purpose of the Lord himself. Because in the previous verse, we said how this world is part of Krishna's play. So yes, Krishna wants to play, therefore he plays with the souls. But this world is not created for the play, but rather it's for our purpose when we choose to play separately from Krishna. When we don't want to play with him, and to keep that play voluntary that is based upon love, Krishna has created this world. So Krishna has created a world of love, only wanting to enjoy and interact with the different living beings. But in order to have that world of love, he has to give us the choice. And that choice is our choice. So therefore, it's not created for Krishna's purpose. He would prefer we don't make that choice. but we make that choice. So the universe is created by the Lord for the living entities. That's the first point. We were discussing some weeks back, not some weeks back, but last week, that how Prabhupada in some places he writes how most of the creation is the spiritual world. Only one small part of it is the material world. And he gives the example of a king or a government that builds a city. And when they build a city, even before people move into that city, they build a prison house. Because they know that in the city, some people will be, rebellious citizens. And so we need a prison house for them. But the prison house is just one building amongst the thousands of buildings in that city. It's not like, Sector 24, or, 1/3 of the entire, city is the prison house. So sometimes it's described that how this material world is 1/3 of the creation. But Prabhupada in that place, he says, no, it's just a small part for those living entities who have chosen, that small minority who have chosen to go to the prison and not stay in the city. And so thus we can understand that all of us in the material world are not the best of the bunch, meaning that we are all finding ourselves in that prison house, being born in the prison, so to say, because we were that small minority that chose to come away from Krishna. So if we're in the material world, we really don't have anything to be proud of. No one does, unless we're liberated, Jivan Mukta, coming to this world for preaching purpose. Aside from that, we're all part of that group that's here in this little prison house. So what do we have to be very, proud about? Because we are just in that little minority. And some might be first class, some second class, third class prisoners, but we're all prisoners. Some of us may have a small cell, others may have a shared cell, others may have a very large cell. But if a prisoner is proud of their cell, I'm on the 3rd floor prison, then that's part of their illusion. So we are the souls who are carried away by the illusory thought. And what was that illusory thought? Of becoming one with him by imitation. And this is very interesting. I've never really seen Srila Prabhupada describe it like this, but we generally say the thought of becoming one with the Lord, right? That the Mayavadis, they want to become one with the Lord, and that is not correct. Or we think, Prabhupada says, that we wanted to imitate the Lord. That is, we wanted to become Krishna. We wanted to be God. That's why we came to this world. But here Prabhupada brings both of those things together. He says becoming one with him by imitation. Where he's saying essentially the desire to become one with the Lord, the Mayavadi desire, is the very desire why we came to this material world. It was a desire to imitate Krishna, to become Krishna. So Prabhupada says we come to this world when we want to be God ourselves, rather than serve God, rather than serve Krishna. And it's that fundamental desire of becoming envious of the Lord that manifests into this material world. And that is the core, you could say, feeling or principle behind Mayavad philosophy, that I will become God. I will become one with God. That is the very illusion that brings us to this world. And this is why Srila Prabhupada is so vehemently opposed to Mayavadis, why he talks about Mayavadis so much. Because it's not just about the Mayavadi philosophy, but it's really about the reason why we come to this world. We came to this material world because we forgot Krishna. We came to this material world because we wanted to become Krishna. We wanted to become God ourselves. And we are perpetuating that by the Mayavad philosophy now. So then we due to that illusion, we come to this world. And here we meet the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And then we become further bewildered. We become further entangled by these three modes, because we want to try to fulfill that desire of becoming Kṛṣṇa in so many ways. So the modes provide us those facilities. And then once we're engrossed in those modes of nature, then we consider ourselves a part of the material creation. We forget our spiritual identity. We become blinded. And then we think this is all in all. We become entangled in material activities of life, in life after life. There's a very nice verse that is there in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I'll share in a minute. This material world is not for the purpose of the Lord himself, which we just said, but it's for the conditioned souls who wanted to be controllers due to the misuse of their God-gifted minute independence. So Kṛṣṇa is the controller. Kṛṣṇa is the Lord. But because we wanted to imitate him, we wanted to become Kṛṣṇa. Therefore, we came to this material world. And the tendency to control, the desire to control, is the very part of that desire to be Kṛṣṇa. And that's why the lack of desire to control is more in the mode of goodness. And that goodness is closer to Kṛṣṇa. And the more we want to control, it's in the mode of passion. Those who don't have that desire to control, they stay happy. They're satisfied. Because they don't want anything, they don't want to control anything. They're satisfied. Their desire is simply to serve. Now, service may involve taking ownership, managing certain things. But when we remember that Kṛṣṇa is the controller, then that responsibility of control or management does not give us anxiety, because we understand that ultimately Kṛṣṇa is the controller. So I may not be able to, quote unquote, control this situation or manage this situation or organize this situation. They're all sort of the same thing. Organizing is a form of controlling. You're telling people where to go, and it's necessary to serve Kṛṣṇa. Like Prabhupada was controlling so many aspects of that, but he wasn't exactly controlling, because he knew that the ultimate controller is Kṛṣṇa, and he just wants to be the servant. So when we don't misuse that minute independence, and we remember that Kṛṣṇa is the controller of everyone, then that person becomes very happy. So we've forgotten this spiritual identity, and we become entangled and absorbed in our material life in this world. And so there's a very nice verse here in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then also I want to share one more verse after that. This is the very famous verse that Srila Prabhupada quotes again and again. Kṛṣṇa bhulya jeev sai jiva anadi bahir mukha ataeva maya tare deya sansara dukha. Forgetting Kṛṣṇa, the living entity, has been attracted by the external feature from time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy Maya gives him all kinds of misery in his material existence. So we may be feeling miserable, but why do we get misery? Because we have forgotten our eternal relationship with Kṛṣṇa. We've been attracted to the material existence, and we've forgotten that we're originally a part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa. And our most blissful existence is just to be an eternal servant of Kṛṣṇa. That gives us so much happiness and so much bliss. And to really illustrate this, there's a very nice verse in the Nectar of Instruction, in which Rupa Goswami, all these books are endeavoring, all these books are attempting to help us give up our attachment for the material world and remind us of our relationship with Kṛṣṇa, because they know that this is how we'll be happy. They are reminding us of our eternal relationship with Krishna, because they know that this is actually the thing that the soul is missing out on. Why is he missing this so much? And this is Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction, text 10. And this is one of my favorite verses of all time. I think this is like really just reading this verse anytime gives so much inspiration. But there's so many nice verses, and this is one of them that Rupa Goswami has written. Karmi bhya parito harer priyataya vyaktim yayur jnaninas tebhyo jnana vimukta bhakti parama premaika nisthastata tebhyasta pashupala pankaja drishas tabhyopi saradhika preshtha tadvadiyam iyam tadiyas sarasi tam nashrayet kakriti. In the Shastra, it is said that of all types of fruitive workers, one who is advanced in knowledge of the higher values of life is favored by the Supreme Lord Hari. Out of many such people who are advanced in knowledge, jnanis, one who is practically liberated by virtue of his knowledge, may take to devotional service. He is superior to the others. However, one who has actually attained prema, pure love of Krishna, is superior to him. The gopis are exalted above all the advanced devotees because they are always totally dependent upon Sri Krishna, the transcendental cowherd boy. Among the gopis, Srimati Radharani is the most dear to Krishna. Her Kunda lake is as profoundly dear to Lord Krishna as the most beloved of the gopis. Who then will not reside at Radha Kund and in a spiritual body surcharged with ecstatic devotional feelings, render loving service to the divine couple, Shri Shri Radha Govinda, who perform their Ashtakalya Lila, their eternal eightfold daily pastimes. Indeed, those who execute devotional service on the banks of Radha Kund are the most fortunate people in the universe. And in this verse, it's a very big verse. There's so many nice things, but the sentence that really is relevant to our discussion today is that Rupa Goswami describes that how the spiritual body is surcharged with ecstatic devotional feelings. That in the material body, we always have so many anxieties. We're always entangled by so many modes of material nature, just miserable. But the spiritual body, the moment we realize our forgotten relationship with Krishna, the moment we realize our spiritual body, then that spiritual body, the very body itself, is surcharged with devotional ecstatic feelings. That spiritual body is made of spiritual ecstatic feelings. So it's not possible for us to be in the spiritual body and be unhappy at any point in time. One is always blissful, ecstatic with love, with prema for Krishna in one's natural position, in one's relationship with the Lord. And that is the what we want. You know, that is the feelings that we are searching for in this world. That is the position we want, is a situation where we can just be happy. And that is the spiritual body. So all these books, all these instructions are urging us that to get out of the material world, to the whole material consciousness, and to come in the spiritual consciousness. They're urging us to remember our as Prabhupada says, our great inheritance, our home of the greatest fortune, to remind us of our good fortune, so we don't have to be resigned to bad fortune. And I'll just end with this. There's a story in the Srimad Bhagavatam of of Puranjan, right? And this story is being narrated. And at the end of the story, Puranjan receives liberation. And from being an analogy, it becomes a actual, it kind of like the border from metaphor to history changes. So he's giving an analogy, Narad Muni, but then he ties it into the life of a real person. So Puranjan is very attached to his family, to his body, to his wife particularly, and he becomes absorbed in thoughts of his wife. And when he dies, he thinks of his wife. And so in his next life, he's born as Queen Vaidharvi. And he's married to King Malayadhvaja. Now, when he's born as Vaidharvi, then he's in a previous life he's a king, now a queen. He, as a she, has a very nice life, very wonderful life, very attached to her wonderful husband Malayadhvaja. And then Malayadhvaja dies. And when Malayadhvaja dies, then Vaidharvi makes a funeral pyre for him. They're in the forest because they went for austerities once they became old. And she's building the fire for him. And after placing his body there, then she's preparing to enter the fire herself, as was the custom at that time. But we see how the Bhagavatam is beyond customs, and there's so much criticism about sati, and how the Bhagavatam is not subject to that criticism, because when she's about to enter the fire, then a Brahmana comes and stops her and tells her that, "O queen, why are you entering into this fire? Why are you doing this?" Even though she's acting in the way that a Vedic woman was supposed to, so to say, act, he tells her, "No, why are you acting in this way? This is not necessary. This is not wanted." And then he says, "Have you forgotten your lost friend?" Your lost friend, Avigyata Sakha. The name for the lost friend is Avigyata Sakha, the unknown friend. In the Bhagavatam, there's actually a name for Kṛṣṇa as the lost friend. This is actually, Bhagavatam confirms that he's our original friend and we've forgotten him, the forgotten friend, Avigyata Sakha. And Malayadhvaja tells Vaidharvi, the Brahmana tells Vaidharvi that, "Have you forgotten that you and I," so Krishna's come as the Brahmana, "we used to be two swans in the Manasa lake." Two swans are what? The Atma is compared always to a swan, a Hansa. Therefore, a great soul is called a Paramahansa. And it's interesting that this has always been the way the soul is described. Even in the Greek philosophy, Plato describes a soul as Hansa. So even in Greek philosophy, this is there. You can find it in his Republic. He talks about the soul as a swan. And scholars study it, and they say that this could not be coincidence, but rather Plato definitely studied the Upanishads and the Vedas, and this is where he got the metaphor from. So he says, we are two swans in the Manasa lake. Now, in India, there's a Mansarovar, and this is up in the Himalayas. And this lake is a place where the sages stay, because this is even beyond Kedarnath. One cannot get up there by any kind of material means, really. I mean, you can, but it's like you need to, if you don't have a helicopter or whatnot, then you need mystic powers, because there's about 12 feet of snow up there in the Himalayas. And definitely 5,000 years ago, when there wasn't global warming, there's 20 feet of snow. So you cannot walk on it. You'll go into the snow. It's that high up in the mountains. And in the middle of the mountains is the Manasa lake. And this is where it's said that the gods and goddesses, they come to earth and they frolic, because human beings cannot get there. And even to this day, if you go up to Kedarnath, Badrinath, they say that some sages are up there and they come down and people see them coming down. And if you can make it there, then only the sages there currently living there, there's sages currently there, they just wear a kopin in the snow and they're like mystic yogis. And even helicopters can't really get there because of the conditions. So it's very, very treacherous, but very pure up there. So it's an actual lake. But here, that is being referred to that, so to say, abode, that we were in that place beyond the material world. It's a Dhamma, right? It's also a holy place. So it's the Manasa lake. But that's also being described as the mind, the Manasa, the mind. And the two swans, they reside in the mind. So Kṛṣṇa and the super soul, they reside in the mind. And the mind is non-different than the heart. The heart is the mind. The brain is not the mind, but the heart is the mind. This is why there's so much emphasis on the heart. Place Kṛṣṇa within your heart. Why do all cultures say, my heart says? I mean, the heart is just a bloody thing that pumps. So why didn't they talk about the brain? You know, my brain says this. Why did they say the heart? Because in Vedic culture and cultures that, all the cultures, essentially, because they're inspired by the Vedas, the mind rests in the heart. So he's saying that we've been in this, have you forgotten, we've been together in the Manasa lake for many, many lifetimes, millions of lifetimes. And have you forgotten your fellow swan who's been always with you in that Manasa lake? And then he says, and I can, we're out of time, but the verses are actually there, very nice verses. He says, have you forgotten that we were frolicking together, but that you left me? And the verse actually says this, the actual Sanskrit says this, that you left me in search for carnal pleasures. So this is the 4th canto. He says, you left me, you went down. The verse says just down. He doesn't say down where. It says you left down in search of carnal pleasures. Right? So this Brahmana tells Vaidarbhi that, have you forgotten your avigyata sakha, your unknown friend? And we were in the lake for so many lifetimes. And before that, we were frolicking, but you left me and you came to this material world. So, like the Brahmana, Prabhupada, the devotees, the scriptures are all trying to remind us of our forgotten relationship and urging us to remember our unknown friend, the Avagyata Sakha. So I'll stop here. We're 10 minutes over time. If there's any final comment or question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for a nice class.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
I mean, if anyone has any questions, otherwise I have one question, Prabhu.
Yes, please go ahead.
From the verse, actually, I mean, can you please elaborate on why the Lord dissolves the creation, right? Whatever He does in the material world. So maybe if you can just explain a little bit more, Prabhu.
Yeah, so he creates, maintains, and dissolves the creation. This is because the creation is eternal. Maya is eternal. The gunas are eternal. So the material creation is eternally the energy of the Lord, but Krishna creates, maintains, and destroys it in a cycle. So Prakriti itself is eternal, but it's created and destroyed in a cycle because of the temporary nature of this world. So everything is temporary. So it's created, maintained, and destroyed. So why the Lord does it this way? Why doesn't he just create the material world and keep it that way? It's because, you know, like Kali Yuga, it becomes very, very degraded, and then he has to start it again, Satyug. But ultimately, it's just because this is the way he's designed this world for our purification. So the souls, they go into his body, then they come out, they stay latent for some time, they're created, maintained, and destroyed. And we were just talking about this Bhakti Vaibhav class that when the Lord comes in touch with this world, then he takes the form of the guna avatars, which are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, creation, maintenance, and destruction. And these are also related with the 3 modes. sattva, rajas, and tamas. Rajas is creation, sattva is maintenance, and tamas is destruction. So therefore the modes are here, so these things must happen.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah.
Thank you. Nice point. Yes. Nice question. Amalatma Prabhu, I think you had unmuted. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu. I was just kind of hearing the class, and I was just appreciating how much content you were covering across Chaitanya Charitamrita and Nectar of Instruction, and how you were connecting it all together. And this is a very complex subject matter, but you covered so much and you made it so nice. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's actually the subject matter I'm interested in myself. So that's I got a nice verse today by Lakshmikant Prabhu's mercy. Yes.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we'll stop here. We're over time. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Then.